It's cool to be here. I'm new here, and my name is Mark Arant. I'm one of the pastors down at Veritas Church in Iowa City, and it's so good to be here. I realize there's like some open seats here in the front. I don't know if it's like this. This is kind of cool that there's empty seats this morning because a bunch of college students are down at the conference in Des Moines. I was there Friday night, like 5,000 college students from over the U.S., and I saw the Dubuque student section there at the conference. That was awesome, representing Dubuque. That was really cool. And yeah, so we're it's kind of like coming to a game this morning. Being at church, it's kind of like coming to a game without the student section. You know what I mean? You feel, and we do have some students here, so we're glad that you're here. But we do kind of feel that this morning. So that's but we're excited for them and what God's doing in their hearts, and just can't wait for them to come back with a passion to reach their campus and the city for Christ. So that was awesome. I was there Friday night. Couple things, just real quick about me. My wife and I have 6 kids, oldest 21, youngest down to 10. And I just have to tell you, this was one of the most emotional weeks of my life. And we're not a huge sports family, but my son got super into wrestling. 7th grade year, he's like, I want to do wrestling. I'm like, what? I don't get it. But he just like jumped all in. And some of you guys are in Dubuque, so I have to know, there's probably some people that get wrestling, right? It's kind of a wrestling town, right? Some heads nodding, yes. And so my son, as a senior, and his goal was to make state and stand on the podium. And 3A, it's not hard. It's very hard. He's 145, so it's like very tough weight class. And you guys, he made state, and we were there this week, and I was so proud of him. He wrestled back. He lost his first match, a kid he had beat twice. Some of you guys are like, I don't care about this. I'm really emotional about it. So just like enter in for a minute with me. Let me have my moment, my dad moment. But heartbreaking loss to a kid he had already beat twice, and in districts beat him. And his wrestle back was against a kid who beat him for number 1 in this tournament. And Beck got second place. But when this kid beat him, he put his hand on his neck as he was getting up and just held him down, and then kind of just stood over him, and walked away, and just like, and as a dad, it was just a humiliating moment for my son and for me. And so he lost his first match at state, and guess who he has to face second round? That guy. And so he comes in, and this kid is tough. And so Beck comes in. I'm like, oh no, here we go. And they announce the mat number, we're Wells Fargo, and they announce the mat, and it's the mat right in front of us. We're like 3rd row. It's mat 4. It's right there. I'm like, oh my word, and I'm just, as a dad, just like, oh, this is like the most emotional nerves. And he comes out there, and you guys, he wins 8-7 against this guy. It was awesome. It was a great moment. And it's cool. Yeah. I was like, oh man, that's great. God, you didn't have to do that, but we're, and I'm not a prosperity gospel preacher, but when it comes to my kids in sports, somehow I become like, Lord, I know you want them to win, right? So, I'm a man of faith in those moments. But then his second match, he's up the whole time, dominating this kid. He's right there, close to the podium, and the kid escapes, ties it in the very last seconds, overtime, takes back down. His career's over, and it's just like, oh, everything that he had wanted to get to, and he was 1 takedown away from the school record for takedowns, and I'm just like, he just misses the podium, and I'm just like, as a dad, looking up like, Father, and he's like, this is the plan, and have you ever had those moments in life where just like disappointment, and you have all these hopes, dreams, and you just fall just short? And maybe it's not sports, maybe it's some other kinds of disappointment in your life where it's like, no, this is not the plan. Like, God, come on, let me catch you up on the plan, and just disappointment, unmet expectations. Like, this isn't the way it was supposed to go down. And there's times where, and it's one thing when it's sports, and we can all kind of like, it's really not that big of a deal. We know sports is kind of the candy aisle of life, right? We know that, we get that. It's still heartbreaking, but then there's other things that like really matter. When it's like all of a sudden it's my mother-in-law and it's like lung cancer, and that's not, you never smoked, and this is not the way it's supposed to go down, right? And you've experienced this, kids and all the things, right? This morning, we're stepping into the middle of a story. If you're new and if you've been tracking with us, you're kind of caught up and you're excited for Revelation 6 and 7. If you have a Bible, you can open there, or you can turn it on if you're tracking on a phone. And I just want to real quick, there's a little a way that you can stay. If you could show that slide on the podcast. So you can go to the Veritas Church Dubuque podcast. I think this is the link to Spotify, and you can maybe find it other places. But if you haven't been keeping up with Revelation, you can catch up there. There's also a little podcast that we did. A couple of the pastors, Jeff Dodge from Iowa City, and then Jake each from Cedar Rapids. We did a little kind of intro to Revelation and just processing what we're learning as we study that, but that's available there too, and you can track with us. And so what we're going to see this morning in Revelation is that over all the chaos, Jesus is Lord. You guys ready for that? And I think we kind of need, we need some Jesus is Lord encouragement in our lives. If you're anything like me, maybe it's a heartbreaking loss, or maybe it's something more significant than sports, but we're going to jump right in. Are you guys ready? This is going to be like a roller coaster ride. We've got a lot to cover, and so I want you to track with us. So we're in Revelation 6, verse 1. Then I saw the Lamb open one of the 7 seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures say with a voice like thunder, "Come." Okay, can we stop here? I have to catch you up on the drama of what's happening here. Revelation, a lot of imagery, a lot of, and some of you guys might be like, "Ooh, Revelation, that's kind of a scary book. I don't know how to interpret it. It's confusing." Here's the thing that's encouraging to me. As I've studied Revelation, it's become less confusing and more worshipful. I hope it will for you as well. But here's what's happening. I got to catch you up. John, the Apostle John, is having this revelation, seeing he's exiled on this island called Patmos. He's suffering for the gospel. And he gets this revelation of Jesus Christ. That's the name of this book, the revelation of Jesus Christ. And what just happened in chapter 5 is that he's in the throne room of God, and he sees there's this scroll, and this scroll is like the title deed of the universe. It's like God's plan for everything. It's like all the answers of all of your why did this happen and what, it's in this scroll, and it's got 7 seals on it, like these wax seals that John probably talked about this last week. And he starts crying in heaven. He has this moment of crying in the presence of God. And he's sad. Why is he sad? Because nobody can open this scroll. Nobody's worthy to open the scroll. And so this guy's like, "Hey, look, there's the slaughter." He looks and he sees the slaughtered lamb, Jesus. And the lamb takes the scroll and begins to open it. And each one of those wax seals, he slits it and starts to open this scroll. And so that's what's happening here. That's the drama that you're caught up in. Is this morning we're about to see the opening of God's scroll, this plan of salvation and redemption that's so confusing to us. Verse 2, "So I looked, and there was a white horse." This is the first seal. "Its rider held a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out as a conqueror in order to conquer." Okay, so the first seal is opened, and the first seal is war breaks out on the earth. Verse 3, when he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, "Come." Then another horse went out, a fiery red one, and its rider was allowed to take peace from the earth, so that the people would slaughter one another, and a large sword was given to him. Okay, the second seal is opened, and law and order is taken away, and civil war breaks out on the earth. Verse 5, when he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come," and I looked, and there was a black horse. Its rider held a set of scales in his hand. Then I heard something like a voice among the four living creatures say, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, but do not harm the oil and wine." The third seal here is this measuring device with the 2 small trays. You know how they used to, the good and the bad. You kind of put this scale to weigh things out. And basically what this is saying is, in this seal, there's a scarcity of food. Famine breaks out. There's a lot of possibilities for this. Do not harm the oil and wine, which we won't get into. But verse 7, when he opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and there was a pale green horse. Its rider's name was Death, and Hades was following after him. They were given authority over a fourth of the earth to kill by the sword, by famine, by plague, and by the wild animals of the earth. So the fourth seal is open, and it's death. Let's stop here because we can't miss what's going on in this drama. What does this opening of this scroll sound like to you? We've got wars, civil wars, famine, earthquakes, viruses. What does this sound like to you? I want you to think about this. As this first century audience is hearing about these scrolls being opened, what would they have been thinking about? Imagine the things that they would have lived through by this time. So if John's writing in something maybe 60s, something 90 AD, something like that. But I want you to think about the global disasters that this original audience would have lived through. 64 AD, the Great Fire of Rome. Rome burns down, and who gets blamed? The Christians, right? So suffering breaks out in the church. 68 to 70 AD, that 2-year period where 4 Roman emperors were killed. Could you imagine if the president gets killed, the vice president gets killed, the third in power, right? Some of you know who that would be. If you've, Speaker of the House, I don't know. Is that right? I don't know. Who's fourth in line? I don't know. But imagine this, right? What would we think if that happened in 2 years? We would think apocalypse. That happened for these original audience. Like these emperors are getting killed. 70 AD, the temple is destroyed. That place where sacrifices, all the lineage for the Israelites, burned up, gone. Like, that's a pretty big deal. 79 AD, Mount Vesuvius erupts in southern Italy, one of the deadliest natural disasters in European history. Okay, now let me just say this. What is the cause of all of these calamities that are happening through these seals being opened? Like, who's behind it all? Are these just random, impersonal forces of Mother Nature that are happening? No. Who's over all of this? Who's the cause? Who's the one bringing this? Well, this book is called Revelation. What is God revealing to these first century Christians and to us here in 2023? What is he saying to us? What he's saying is that over all the chaos that's happening on this earth, Jesus Christ is exalted over all of it because he's the one opening the scroll. So here's kind of the point that I want to make from this. You know, chaos, that complete disorder and confusion that we feel in our life. Here's the point. Write this down if you're taking notes. Chaos is only chaos when you factor Jesus out of the equation. Here's what I mean by that. I want you to think of something in your life that feels chaotic. Something in your life that feels out of control. Something that's causing you stress. Okay, over all of that distress in your life, Jesus Christ is sovereign over it. He's in control of it. And how terrifying it would be if your life was just random chance. That actually God is not in control. And he's looking down from heaven, he's like, oh no, I can't believe that just happened. And he's actually has no control over the events of your life. Is that comforting to you? A God who cannot control your situation? Can you worship a God like that? Or some of you might be troubled by the other thought that, wait, he let that distress happen to me. I don't know if I can worship that God who's opening this. You're telling me God is opening this scroll and that's why this earthquake rumbled and 40,000 plus people killed? You know, I don't know if this is encouraging or troubling to me, right? Do you guys feel that? The weight of this? Like, is this troubling to you or is this comforting? I don't know. Well, if it's troubling to you, you're not alone. Because look at verse 9. When Jesus opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slaughtered because of the word of God and the testimony they had given. The fifth seal. John gets a different perspective. Now he looks, and he's not seeing all this devastation on earth. Now he looks and he sees these martyrs, you know, these people who have given their lives for Jesus, and they're dead because they witnessed for Christ and they lost their life. They were killed. Verse 10, these martyrs, they cried out with a loud voice, Lord, the one who is holy and true, how long until you judge those who live on the earth and avenge our blood? I can't even believe that this is in the Bible. These martyrs in heaven are in the presence of God saying, what's up with this, God? How long are you going to wait and just watch this bloodbath on earth of all of these like good people like us witnessing for Christ and spilling their blood and dying for the gospel? How long until you judge those? They're groaning in prayer. And this is what's interesting. They're confused. They don't get it. Like, God, I don't understand what you're doing here. This shouldn't be the plan. And God, they're confused, but they're not angry. They still refer to God as holy and true, right? But really their question is something like this. How can God be just if evil is never punished? Right? If you've been the victim of a crime or something bad's happened to you or somebody stole something from you or worse, someone really hurt you, you've had these feelings of like, God, you're just going to watch this happen? How long are you going to let this go on? Right? There's some tension here, right? In this text, verse 11. So they were each given a white robe, and white symbolizes the clean, washed, purified, victorious. And they were told to rest a little while longer until the number would be completed of their fellow servants and their brothers and sisters who were going to be killed just as they had been. That is one of the strangest ways to encourage somebody. Like, hey, just be patient. Rest a little while longer. More people need to die So just take comfort in that. How is that comforting? In what universe is it comforting that more people need to die? Well, I'll tell you how it's comforting. He says, until the full number has been completed. It's like what he's saying is, I have a plan, trust me. Just rest and trust me. In your suffering, trust me. Here's the second point to write down if you're taking notes. It's okay to be confused, but rest in this truth. God will bring justice. And these martyrs have been waiting a long time, haven't they? 2,000 years later, there have been more martyrs, more people killed for their faith in the last 150 years than in the previous 18 centuries. And even today, more will be killed for the gospel in places like Saudi Arabia, Somaliland, right? All over the world, this is happening. And here's a question as we continue. How is this whole suffering strategy helping God be glorified? Because at this point, I'm still a little confused on why God would go with this suffering strategy through opening these scrolls, this scroll. So verse 12. Then I saw him open the sixth seal. A violent earthquake occurred. The sun turned black like sackcloth made of hair. The entire moon became like blood. The stars of heaven fell to the earth as a fig tree drops its unripe figs when shaken by a high wind. The sky was split apart like a scroll being rolled up. You guys know that hymn? The sky be rolled back as a scroll. It is well. It is well with my soul. That comes from this verse 14. And every mountain and island was moved from its place. Here we have the sixth seal, the great day of the Lord. And this first century audience would have known where this comes from. Isaiah chapter 2, Joel chapter 2. This is almost a quote from those prophets. And they speak of this, this cataclysmic event that's coming. Now, here's the question. One of the interpretive challenges of Revelation we see here in this text is, does this refer to one final sort of global cataclysmic event where all the tectonic plates on the earth shake at one time, and it's like this global, like planet Earth shaking, and is that what it's describing here? It talks about the sun gets black, the moon is kind of appears red. Is that like volcanoes erupting and blocks the sun and from the volcanic ash or whatever? And this is like stars falling. Is that like a massive asteroid hitting the earth or a meteor shower, something like that? What is this? Is this a future event, or is this a present day thing like Turkey, Syria? Is that what's happening? Or is it kind of both? Here's what I want to say is, I don't know. But it kind of doesn't matter, because look at what happens here. Look at the point of verse 15, what he's saying. And here's the response of the people on earth. Verse 15. Then the kings of the earth, the nobles, the generals, the rich, the powerful, and every slave and free person, what did they do? Did they run to Jesus to be saved? What does it say? No. They hid in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains. And they said to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of the one seated on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb, because the great day of their wrath has come, and who is able to stand? How do these people on earth respond to the judgments of God, these wars and civil wars and earthquakes? How do they respond? They say, hide us from his face. We want nothing to do with him. How did people respond to the most recent global pandemic? What did you guys experience? Did people come out of their caves, their basements, their homes, like these people? They ran to their caves, and did they come out repentant? You know, I don't know about you, but it's been so encouraging to watch the news, you know, like 5:30 news, because the news anchors, they're coming out and they're talking about how just people, revivals breaking out, and they highlight all the stories of people coming to know Jesus and baptisms and how people are turned into Jesus, right? Isn't that what's happened? No. The opposite. It feels like somebody hit fast forward. We all kind of see this train, like it's like watching our culture is like watching a train get derailed in slow motion. You know, it has been. We kind of seen that, you know, the sexual revolution of the 60s and, you know, kind of living through a lot of this stuff. We kind of see the decay of culture, but it's like the last 2 years, somebody hit fast forward, almost like, you know, it's like careening into and we're like, what just happened? Things that like 5 years ago, you would have thought nobody would ever think that, much less ever say it out loud. And now it's like someone's saying it and everyone's like, oh, totally. That's how it is. Like, what planet are we living? You guys, has that been your experience too? Like last 2 years of crazy few years? Here's the thing. Here's what John wants us to know, or Jesus wants John to know. And this is the third point. Don't be surprised when unbelievers respond to trials with a growing hatred of God. It's normal for people to experience trials and suffering and pandemics and all that stuff and grow in their hatred of God. That's what I think is going on here. And I just think that even if a meteor were headed straight for planet Earth, what would people do? Would they flock to church? I don't know. I think it's possible that they would hide in their caves and trust the science. Somebody save us from that meteor that's coming. Government better figure that out. That's their problem. Right? I don't know. But don't be shocked when the response of people to suffering is to grow in hostility. Chapter 7, we turn a corner. After this, I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, restraining the 4 winds of the earth so that no wind could blow on the earth or on the sea or on any tree. Okay, chapter 7, here's what's going to happen. We're turning a corner here. We're going to see a different angle on this judgment. So remember, all these seals are being opened, judgment's happening, and now John sees that God is actually giving the order to restrain the judgment. Hey, angels, hold up. I've got something else going on, holding back these angels. They're kind of on a leash, as it were. Why is God restraining the judgment? Verse 2. Then I saw another angel rising up from the east who had the seal of the living God. He cried out in a loud voice to the 4 angels who were allowed to harm the earth and the sea. Don't harm the earth or the sea or the trees. Why? Until we seal the servants of our God on their foreheads. Okay, let's stop here. This is kind of weird. Guys, hold up. We need to seal our people on their foreheads. Okay, what does that mean? Again, the original audience who was familiar with the Old Testament knows exactly what this means. Ezekiel chapter 9, same exact thing happens. God sends an angel into the temple area to mark the foreheads of his people. Why does he do this? What's significant? I don't know about you, but probably I did a show of hands at Veritas in Iowa City, so it was like 600 people. I said, who has read Ezekiel this week? And there was one hand. So I'm just going to assume that you don't know what Ezekiel 9 is, right? I didn't before I read this. I've read it before, but forgot, and it's my job to not forget this stuff. So let me catch you up. So in Ezekiel 9, God's people, it's a hot mess, right? It's a hot mess in God's people. So they are essentially at this point, God's people are not living holy lives. They're rebellious toward him, but they're going through all the motions of church. It's like if we were like, you're like, oh, I love Veritas, and then Friday night you're at the bar and you're doing all this stuff. Like you're living a reckless life. You really don't care much about God, but you go through the motions of it. Like you're there at Christmas, Easter, all the things. Like you're like, oh, I'm totally a Christian. Okay, God's like, yeah, I have all these people that say they're following me, but it's a problem because they're not. So I want to separate my people from the people that are really my people. So he sends this angel, marks the foreheads of these people. How does he know the people to mark? It's the people, he says, Ezekiel 9, you can read this. It's the people who groan over the evil in the land. It's the people who are like, oh, no, God. This can't be. This corruption, these leaders that are exploiting the poor, that are just fighting for positions of power and abusing God's people, they groan over the evil in the land, right? And they get a mark on their forehead. And God actually kills all the people without the mark on their forehead. Here's what's happening. Judgment is coming to the earth, but it's also being restrained. Why? Because God is saving his people. He's got people that he's saving and pulling out. And we're going to find in chapter 13, Satan also has a seal that he's putting on his people. Stick around for that in the weeks to come. But verse 4, and I heard the number of the sealed. So now he's like, I'm hearing the number of all these people that are getting sealed. 144,000 sealed from every tribe of the Israelites. 12,000 sealed from the tribe of Judah. 12,000 from the tribe of Reuben. And on it goes through all the tribes. Now, let me stop here. What's happening? This is so random. Why do we have all of a sudden a list of 144,000? Who are these people? Okay, this list is kind of an odd list. Do you guys remember, if you've read how many of you guys have read the book of Numbers? Has anyone read this? Not too many, but what you see is there's a list of numbers, right? It's like you read chapter 1 and it's a list, like 56,841 from this tribe, 60,000 from this tribe. You're like, what is this list? It's a military census. That's what the list is. It's the people 20 years older who can fight in the military. So what is this list? And it's a weird list because some of the tribes are not mentioned. Others are inserted. The order is changed. Judah goes first, right? Because of the Lion of Judah. There's some really cool things that we're not going to stop and talk about. But what's the point here? Here's the point. God is raising up an army of Christians. Verse 9, after this I looked, and there was a vast multitude from every nation, tribe, people, and language, which no one could number. They were standing before the throne and before the Lamb. They were clothed in white robes with palm branches in their hands. Palm branches, we know this. Remember Palm Sunday, waving these palm branches, that symbol of the King is here. Palm branch, that symbol of victory, peace, Jesus. They would wave these at the feast of the Passover on the Sunday before Palm Sunday. And John, just think about this. This is so cool. John hears, what does he say? I heard their number. That's weird to hear a number of people, isn't it? That's like hearing a color. I heard the color red or something. Like, how do you hear? How do you hear a number? That's weird. So he hears it, and then he turns around and he looks, and what does he see? It's this vast multitude from every tribe, nation, and tongue. This is the army of God that he sees. Do you guys see what's happening in chapter 6 and 7? All this calamity is hitting the earth, but in the midst of the chaos, He wants John to know, I've got a plan, and my plan is I'm building my church. And it's going to look like the gates of hell are overcoming it, but it's not. I'm raising up an army. 144,000, cool number. Remember the 12 tribes of Israel in the Old Testament? How many disciples were there? 12 disciples. It's showing us the wholeness of the people of God is in this army. 10 times 10 times 10, 144,000 is that Hebrew idea of completeness. This army of God is you, is me. Remember that song we learned in Sunday school? Some of you guys learned it. I'm in the Lord's army, yes, sir. That's what this is. This is the army of God, the people of God. Do you see the contrast? Chapter 6, trials, judgments, and it ends with a question, verse 6:17. The great day of their wrath has come. Who is able to stand? Chapter 7 answers that question. Here's who is able to stand. God's army. God's army. The reason the martyrs are told to wait is because God has a plan for the church. Veritas Dubuque has not yet been planted. Hold on. I've got people that I want to save in the midst of the judgments and trials. Like, that's why you're here this morning, is because Jesus is opening a scroll and he's restraining the judgment so you could be here to hear the good news that Jesus wins. So really the question is, where are you at in relationship to Jesus Christ? Where is your hope this morning? Do you trust that over all the chaos in your life, there is a God who has a purpose for you? And the person sitting in your chair is not here just by random chance. Like, he brought you here to hear the good news that Jesus Christ is Lord. Do you trust him this morning? Do you know him? I'm not saying, do you know about him? Have you heard about him? I'm saying, do you know him this morning? That's what Revelation is all about. And the genius of God's strategy to use suffering and earthquakes and pandemics and cultural wars and suffering and martyrdom. Here's what's so genius about it. When suffering comes, you can't stay on the fence. You cannot stay on the fence. Some of you may have tried that before. Live with one foot in the world and one foot in Jesus and try to do both. But when suffering comes, what happens? You have to choose. That's what I love about this cultural moment. There was a day in America where it might have been a social advantage to say I'm a Christian. Not anymore, right? Choose your side. What happens when the fire comes? The gold gets purified, right? The fire purifies the faith. This is all over the scriptures. And if you don't have a theology of suffering in trials, whether it's your kid loses in the state tournament or it's a loss of a loved one, if you can't say, my hope is built on nothing less than Jesus Christ, his righteousness. If you don't have a song to sing about a God who's in control, then you're standing on sand. Your house is built on sand. I invite you this morning to build your house on Jesus. The heat's getting turned up, but it's purifying the church. Point number 4 here is that suffering makes Christians less popular, but more potent. What this world needs is some real Christians. I want to tell you a story. Little girl in Veritas Kids down in Iowa City. We live in Johnson County. You guys may know this. Dubuque may be similar, but people call Johnson County the People's Republic of Johnson County. It's kind of people in Johnson County don't love Jesus, most of them. And it's a tough place to be a Christian. And this little girl's in the public school, and she was given a assignment. And the assignment was to do the Martin Luther King speech, but adapt it to be your dream. And so she had to give a speech to her whole class, like all the classes of her grade were gathered. And she got to be one of the few people that gave I have a dream speech adapted to her dream. And so she stood up and she said, I have a dream that one day, and she quoted the first part of MLK's just beautiful speech, right? Iconic, wonderful speech. And then she does the assignment. She kind of turns it into her dream. And she says, I have a dream that one day everyone will go to church and worship Jesus Christ and read their Bibles and get to know Jesus. How do you think that speech was met with by the parents? One parent wrote in and said, that child is the reason we need to push diversity, equity, and inclusion. Radical Christians like her need to be silenced. We need to educate her on diversity. And this person wrote in and said, and I'm saying this as a Christian who is offended by that speech. This little girl stood up and proclaimed Jesus. And what's interesting is her dream turns out to be prophetic, right? It's like a real dream that comes true because her dream is Revelation 7. This people that bow before Jesus, in verse 10, they cried out in a loud voice, salvation belongs to our God who is seated on the throne and to the Lamb. All the angels stood around the throne, and along with the elders and 4 living creatures, they fell face down before the throne and worshiped God, saying, Amen. Blessing and glory and wisdom and thanksgiving and honor and power and strength be to our God forever and ever. Amen. Then one of the elders asked me, who are these people in white robes and where did they come from? I said to him, Sir, you know. He told me, yeah, these are the ones coming out of the great tribulation. They washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Tribulation. What does that tribulation refer to? Possibly a future tribulation, but it's possible that this tribulation is now. First century, 2023, it's not so much a technical term, it's a more generic term, like 2 Timothy 3:12 says, anyone who wants to live for Jesus will face tribulation, same word. Verse 15, for this reason, they are before the throne of God and they serve him day and night in his temple. The one seated on the throne will shelter them. They will no longer hunger. They will no longer thirst. The sun will no longer strike them, nor will any scorching heat. For the Lamb who is at the center of the throne will shepherd them. He will guide them to springs of the waters of life, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Wow. Great news. Ezekiel 34 talks about the corrupt leaders who are shepherds, who are exploiting, abusing the people of God. Oh, no more. In heaven, Jesus, the good shepherd, is wiping tears from our eyes. And that's how the story ends for the follower of Jesus. Last point, no matter how bad it gets, our story always ends with a party. So I just want to close with this question. When you look at the world and when you look at your life, what do you see? Do you just see chaos? Or do you see God over the chaos? This morning, I invite you to just see Jesus over it and just trust him, because he wins. Let's pray together. Jesus, I know that all of us have chaos in our lives, things that we might be worried about, things that are happening now, or maybe something coming up, a doctor's appointment we're nervous about, a relationship that's broken, a diagnosis that seems hopeless, the disappointing end to a season or a career, or whatever it is, God. Maybe it's, we look at the world, we see what happened in Turkey, and our hearts are broken over it. We see the direction of our country, and we're just grieved. Jesus, we just need hope this morning. We need to see you. We need to trust you. It's amazing in Revelation that all of these chapters end with songs. So while we wait, let's keep singing. Let's keep trusting.